have palm oil in your hands more often than you think. It's in the soap by your sink. It's in the shortening that made your bread soft. It's in the shine on the shampoo bottle in your shower. It has been there most of your life, worked into so many ordinary things that you have never had a reason to stop and ask where it actually came from. Here's the thing, nobody grows an oil palm the way you'd picture a plantation. For centuries before anyone put a fence around it, it grew inside something else, a forest tended by people that also grew shea and cola and yams and cassava, all in the same ground, all on purpose. 18 years. That is the number I kept returning to. On the other side of the world from where palm oil actually grows, a governor put his name on a document in 1842 protecting a forest exactly like that one. 18 years later, a different government erased it, and the more I looked at that number, the more the ordinary bottle in my kitchen started to feel different in my hand. I wasn't the only one who noticed something was off about the story we're told about wild jungle, not even close. When I started asking around genealogy forums, land history groups, people digging through old family deeds, I found the same quiet unease everywhere, not a fringe feeling. A shared, never quite named suspicion that the empty wilderness in the old records wasn't empty at all. People who'd never met each other on different continents kept describing the same small moment. A grandparent mentioning a forest that used to feed a whole village. A land deed that called productive ground waste for tax purposes. A family story about a place that just went wild after a certain year as if the trees had done it themselves. How did something this engineered get remembered as something this wild? That's the question nobody quite asks, because nobody's ever had a reason to. Here's what we've always been told. The land wasn't being farmed the way a farm is supposed to look. No plowed rows, no fences, no owner on paper, so officials called it empty wilderness and said clearing it was improvement, turning waste into useful land. And I want to be honest, that explanation is not nothing. Foresters trained in the new science of their day genuinely believed a forest of a dozen mixed food species was a waste of good timber, and that a uniform, structural crop was the modern, rational choice. Serious people built real careers on that logic. Governments needed tax revenue they could actually measure, and a forest managed communally, harvested in season, moving with the land, could not be surveyed, deeded, or taxed the way a fenced field could. It accounts for almost everything. Almost. In 1887 and 1891, two British colonial surveyors, Cornelius Alfred Maloney and Alvin Milson, walked through the forests of the Yoruba region and wrote down, in detail, that what looked like jungle was a managed mosaic palm, shea, cola, yam, and cassava, layered on purpose. Within a generation, colonial forestry reports described that same land as primeval rainforest being degraded by native farmers, and used that story to seize it for rubber and cocoa. Which means the palm oil in your hand sits in that gap, in the space between what we've been told and what the specific record shows. And then I found it somewhere else, not a similar thing. The same thing. In 1842, Governor George Gipps of New South Wales issued a legal proclamation reserving the Bunya pine forests north of Moreton Bay for the Aboriginal nations who harvested them every few years in gatherings that fed thousands of people at once. The document is real. It's on page 588 of the New South Wales Government Gazette. It names the tree, it names the people, it bans logging and writing. The proclamation exists because a Scottish engineer named Andrew Petrie went looking in 1838 for the source of a tree the colony had only heard rumors about. He found it, brought samples back, and later walked Governor Gipps through what he'd seen trees old enough and productive enough that thousands of people traveled on foot from different nations to gather beneath them every few years. That gathering is what the 1842 proclamation was written to protect. 18 years later, the newly formed Queensland Parliament repealed it. The Crown Lands Alienation Act of 1860 reclassified those same groves as vacant Crown land. Within 30 years, timber crews had cleared thousands of acres of trees that had fed people for generations, and the official record called it the pioneering of untamed wilderness. It never mentioned that the land had already been legally recognized in writing as something else entirely. 2 instances, different continents, the same gap in the same place in the record. Palm oil, thousands of miles from Queensland, sitting in exactly the same blind spot. Move further out and the same shape keeps appearing. In central India, the naturalist Valentine Ball spent years cataloging the Mahua tree, its sugar-rich flowers, its oil-rich seeds, the way it fed entire Adivasi communities through the dry season. The Indian Forest Acts of 1865 and 1878 designated those same forests reserved, made gathering Mahua a punishable offense, and cleared the trees for teak and sal. When drought hit Chotanagpur in 1896 and 1897, the famine that followed was recorded as an act of weather. Same gap, a continent away. The gap wasn't just administrative. When the drought came, the Mahua trees were still standing. The record shows the trees survived just fine. It was the legal ban on gathering from them that turned a bad harvest into a body count. The official report blamed rainfall. It never mentioned the law. Keep moving. In 1826, the botanist David Douglas walked through Oregon's Willamette Valley and recorded in his own field journal that the open oak plains he saw weren't natural at all. They were burned every year on purpose by the Kalapuya people to keep the ground clear for acorn trees and camas bulbs. By the 1850s, United States General Land Office surveyors mapped that same valley as untouched prairie, waiting for the plow. Same gap, a different government, a different language. Not even the same empire. Once the burning stopped, the record shows something specific happened to the land itself. Conifers and brush moved in within a few decades, choking out the oak and the camas that had grown there for generations. The surveyors who mapped it as virgin prairie were looking at a system already collapsing from the removal of the very management that had built it. Different countries, different languages, different centuries, the same specific thing missing from the same specific place in the record over and over. This is not the shape of coincidence. Coincidence scatters. This clusters, and the same paperwork sits in every one of those places. Not metaphorically. A law reclassifying a documented food system as vacant wasteland exists in Queensland, in Chotanagpur, in the Willamette Valley, and in the Yoruba forests where your palm oil actually grew. It's the same maneuver in every jurisdiction the record covers. You weren't handed the story of one forest. You were handed the story of all of them, and palm oil is the one piece of it you've actually held in your own hand. Here is what the official explanation requires you to accept, not as a conspiracy, as arithmetic. 4 separate governments, 4 separate legislatures, on 4 different continents, using 4 entirely different legal instruments, arrive at the identical piece of reasoning. This is empty land. Clearing it is progress inside a 55-year window between 1842 and 1897. 3 of those governments were part of the British Empire and could plausibly have shared a doctrine through Prussian-trained foresters moving between postings. The 4th, the United States General Land Office, surveying Oregon, had no administrative relationship to the British Crown at all. No shared ministry, no shared statute, no shared forestry service, and it produced the same legal conclusion anyway. 4 continents, 4 different named food systems: Bunya, pine; Mahua, oak and camas; oil palm and shea. 4 different indigenous or local populations speaking none of the same languages, with no contact between them. 1 legal outcome repeated 4 times inside a single human lifetime. If you're the kind of person who notices something like this and can't quite let it go, that's who this channel is for. I dig up the specific instances, source them, and show you exactly where the official story stops accounting for the record. Subscribe if you want to keep finding the next one with me. I am not saying someone coordinated this. I am saying the coordination problem does not have a clean answer inside the official explanation, and the official explanation has never been required to provide one. palm oil is the product of that unexplained arithmetic. Whatever produced it, however it happened. You are holding the output of a legal logic that appeared independently across 4 jurisdictions. In a window the official record has never once called anything but coincidence. Dietrich Brandis stands on the deck of a ship bound for India in 1864. He is not thinking about empire. He is thinking about timber yield per acre. Brandis was a German-trained forester appointed that year to run the brand new Imperial Forest Service under the British Crown. He was responsible for turning India's forests into a sustainable source of structural timber, railway sleepers, ships' masts, building beams. The record shows he did exactly that. Under his direction, the Forest Acts of 1865 and 1878 designated mixed food forests as reserved land and replaced them acre by acre with uniform stands of teak and sal. He trained under the same forestry schools that produced foresters for Prussia, Saxony, and eventually for colonial postings across the British Empire, which is exactly why the same yield per acre logic he carried to India shows up, independently applied, in forestry reports written an ocean away in West Africa 2 decades later. They were not making a decision. They were doing their job. And their job, done exactly as designed, produced a legal template that would remain functionally unchanged across at least 3 continents for decades. Brandis did not know what he was part of. The record does not show that anyone told him. That is either ordinary bureaucracy or the most important thing in this entire investigation. The record cannot tell us which. I want to be honest with you about what I cannot prove, not as a disclaimer. As the most important thing I can say, I cannot show you that these 4 governments were in contact with each other. I cannot show you whether the same reasoning appearing 4 times was deliberate borrowing or 4 institutions independently reaching for the same logic because it served the same purpose. And I cannot show you what these food forests were originally capable of beyond feeding the people who tended them, whether they held other value the record simply never thought to ask about. What I can show you is the pattern. What I cannot show you is the intent. A pattern without documented intent is not proof of anything. It is a shape in the record that the official explanation has not been required to account for. I am also aware that I have been looking for this pattern for months. Minds that look for patterns find them. I am not exempt from that. It would be easy to stack 4 instances and call it proof, and I don't think 4 instances are proof of anything by themselves. What I am asking you to do is not trust my pattern recognition. I am asking you to look at the 4 documented instances I have shown you and tell me whether the official explanation accounts for all of them. It does not account for all of them. That is not my conclusion. That is the gap. There is one thing the record preserved that connects the palm oil in your hand to everything I have shown you. Page 588 of the New South Wales Government Gazette, printed on the 14th of April, 1842, still exists. It sits in the New South Wales State Archives and in the State Library of Queensland, and it has been digitized and put online by Trove, the National Library of Australia. It carries the full text of Governor Gipps's proclamation, in the government's own words, naming the Bunya forest as protected. It survived not because anyone chose to protect it as evidence. It survived because the system that processed everything around it never recognized what it was. Palm oil is in your kitchen, your bathroom, your pantry. It was there before you watched this. It will be there after. Nothing about it has changed. It's the same pale, waxy substance it's always been, faintly sweet, solid at room temperature, worked into 100 products you don't think twice about. What has changed is what you know about where it comes from. About the 55-year window in which 4 unconnected governments reached for the same legal language at once. About Dietrich Brandis, standing on a ship in 1864, doing his job. About the 4 jurisdictions that arrived at the same story about the same kind of land, with no documented reason they should have agreed at all. The palm oil was not created for you. It was created about the forest. It grew and processed out of a system that had a specific designation for what that forest was. and no designation for what it had actually been feeding for centuries before anyone wrote it down as waste. Page 588 remains in a filing cabinet's worth of paper turned digital archive, exactly where a clerk put it 180 years ago. And if you look at it long enough, it tells you exactly how something becomes ordinary, not through familiarity, through the completely ordinary act of no one ever explaining why it was necessary in the first place. Palm oil has been in your life since before you could read the label on the bottle. You have never been asked whether you wanted it processed this way. You have never been told what it replaced. What would you do differently if you had been